Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. It has been almost a year since the disappearance of Carlo from the movie loot, and Susan, his absence has led to massive chaos and despair in the podcasting community. We want the movie loot. We want the movie loot. We want the movie loot.
I'm back.
You got 5 seconds to tell me where you buried the loot. Where's the loot?
I don't know who's got the loot. I don't know if anybody's got the loot.
I'm setting up a guy who's incredibly important to us who's going to tell me where the loot is.
Where's the loot?
Hello, looters. Welcome to the Movie Loot, the podcast where we share the best, greatest, most entertaining, and/or weirdest film that you could find. My name is Carlo, and we'll be sharing the loot today. This will be episode 100 something, the comeback loot. Why? Because we're back. Although for how long, I don't know. But yet, to those that have listened and supported the Movie Loot for years, you obviously know that we've had a rough time. Real life has intervened in more ways than one. Personal issues, family issues, health issues, a bit of everything, which has thrown us from the routine. But we expect that this episode can be a move in the right direction and that we can get back to a steady routine. In the meantime, I still want to thank my listeners because even though we didn't release an episode during 2025, I think we did an Oscars one, but still during last year, we had a couple of breakthrough months in terms of downloads. March and June 2025 were among our best ever, and even this past February was also one of our best downloads month. So even though we're not releasing content, it's humbling to know that people are still listening. So thanks to everybody. So what I wanted to do today is something simple, and it's probably just a way to get myself to record something. But I just wanted to share a list of the 5 best first-time watches I had last year, from January to December 2025, and talk a bit about them. So without further ado, let's do the comeback loot. Let's start with our first one, and let's start with a weird one. And the first one I want to talk about is a film called Boom with an exclamation point from 1968. And this film follows Flora Goforth, played by Elizabeth Taylor, a wealthy but terminally ill woman living in a secluded private island surrounded by servants whom she constantly abuses and mistreats. That is until Chris Flanders, played by Taylor's real life husband, Richard Burton, shows up and boom, her life is thrown in more disarray as he presents himself as both an old acquaintance but also as the angel of death who may or may not have come for her. This is a film I hadn't even heard about until it was recommended on a film forum. That's probably because the film was a huge box office bomb at the moment. It was initially made as a vehicle to revitalize Taylor's career, but that wasn't the case. It went through several names and renames, even adding the exclamation point to the title to maybe jolt its marketing chances, but to no avail. The thing is that despite whatever critics and audiences said, I found myself so mesmerized and captivated by this film. First, for its impressive set design and Taylor's larger than life performance, or her reluctant attraction to Burton's magnetic character, but also, or perhaps primarily, for its existential musings, which is something I find myself leaning to in films more often nowadays. Because for most of its duration, this is a film just about two middle aged people talking to each other about life and love and whatnot. So in that regards, I understand why a film like this would bomb, regardless of how many exclamation points you add. A film like that is a hard sell, but I just found myself obsessed with it still to this day. The film was directed by Joseph Losey, who was not necessarily a household name, but did films like The Servant and Accident back in the day. But anyway, his direction is one of those cases where, to me, everything in the frame felt purposeful. Every line of dialogue seemed to be delivered with intent. Every costume the characters wear carries a message, and every conversation between the two characters draws us deeper into whatever it is they're sinking into. It's just hard to explain, but that's how it felt for me. So if you feel you're up for something like that, check out Boom. So let's continue with another weird one. And the second one I want to talk about is The Death of Mr. Lazarescu from 2005. This is a Romanian film set in a single night, and it follows the titular character played by Ioan Fiscutenau. I'm probably mispronouncing that, but he's an elderly man that starts being bothered by a headache and a stomachache, which turns out to be something worse, forcing him to journey through the decaying healthcare system of the country, which is plagued by bureaucracy and indifference. His only companion is a loyal paramedic played by Luminita Georgiou, who tries her best to get Mr. Lazarescu the care he desperately needs. First, this is yet another film that was recommended on a film forum I frequent. Second, it is often sold as a black comedy, which it decidedly is not. So whoever did that must have been a young hotshot or have a sick sense of humor, because the film is a bleak but honest snapshot of the inner workings and failings of any country's health system. It is set in Romania, but as someone who has spent his fair share of time in hospitals and ERs, I can say it could have been set in Puerto Rico, and maybe you'll say it could have been set in the United States or wherever you live. What makes the film so accurate is the banality of the interactions and the mundane exchanges between most of the people involved, doctors, nurses, etc. The chit chat, the flirting, the ego, the regular small talk with coffees in hand while looking for a phone charger, all while a suffering human being is withering in pain in a stretcher next to them. Things that are not necessarily wrong, but thus lend themselves to such contrasting perspectives of life and routine in situations like this. This is all elevated by some really strong performances beyond the two leads, which are really good, but a lot of the doctors and nurses are perfectly portrayed to the point that it made me wonder if they hired actual medical staff for this. So if you don't mind a bleak film about someone dying, this is another one I totally recommend, The Death of Mr. Lazarescu. So for the third one, let's go with one that's probably a bit more popular, and that is High and Low from 1963. This is from Akira Kurosawa, and the film follows Kingo Gondo, played by the great Toshiro Mifune, a wealthy businessman that finds himself in a pickle, to put it mildly, when someone mistakenly kidnaps the son of his driver, thinking it was his son. And this happens when Gondo was right in the middle of a major business move to gain control of the shoe company he works at, but the kidnapping and the ransom puts a lot of pressure on his plans and his life. I came a bit late to Kurosawa, but ever since I've become a big fan of everything I've seen from him. High and Low may not be as grandiose as Ran or Throne of Blood or as emotionally powerful as Ikiru, but what it does extremely well. The film is credited with paving the way for what we now know as the police procedural, as we follow not only Gondo's desperate attempt to get the money, but also the attempts of the police to track down the kidnapper. Just like the title suggests, High and Low is a film about contrasts. The title can also be translated to Heaven and Hell, while there's a lot of reference to the cold air conditioner in Gondo's mansion, which is high in a mountain, where most of the first half of the film is set, and the heat in the low slums where the kidnapper might be operating from, which is where the second half of the film concentrates. So there's a lot of that half and half juxtaposition, and the use of those contrasts works wonders for the story, I think. But in the middle of it all, we have this police procedural framework that is incredibly engaging, anchored by the performance of Tatsuya Nakadai as the lead inspector Tokura, along with his team of experts. The film does a great job of showing how the police go about their work to try and find this kidnapper. Those bits in the police precinct were remarkably engrossing and engaging. So if you're a fan of Kurosawa or cop films or thrillers and still haven't seen High and Low, do yourself a favor and check it out. Like I said, it might not be as quote unquote flashy as other films of Kurosawa, but it's still an effectively paced thriller that takes you all the way from the highs to the lows. The fourth one I want to talk about is yet another one that's probably more popular, and it's Cape Fear from 1962. This one follows Sam Bowden, played by Gregory Peck, an attorney who is being stalked by Max Cady, played by Robert Mitchum, a violent psychopath that holds him responsible for a prison sentence he had to serve. As Cady gets closer to Bowden and his family, he finds himself in the legal and moral threshold of what he can and should do to protect himself, his wife, and his young daughter. Now, this is a film I had been meaning to see for a very long time. Back in the early 90s, I remember I saw a Scorsese remake without necessarily having concrete knowledge of an original version of who Scorsese was. But anyway, at 13 or 14 years old, it kind of left an impression, even if I haven't gotten back to it. But when I found out about the original, I knew I would check it out at some point. Both films follow more or less the same beats in terms of the story. I really enjoyed the intensity from both lead performances, Peck and Mitchum, especially Mitchum, who I'm a big fan of. His Max Cady is one that's unnerving and chilling while also oozing confidence and glee. One thing that surprised me is that being set in the 60s, I was expecting the original to be more toned down, but I was actually quite surprised by how bleak and dark it was. J. Lee Thompson's direction was also extremely effective in how it builds the tension around the threat of Katie getting closer and closer to the inevitable clash between them. And even though there are some things that Katie does in the last act that left me scratching my head, I was definitely surprised by how great this film was. So, regardless of whether you've seen Scorsese's remake or not, check this one out. Back when I saw it, my friend Stu from Stewart Order said, "Never seen the original." Well, you should check it out, Stu. And my friend Jerry Sarabia, Jerry at the movie, said, "Pretty damn good movie, but I think Scorsese's film is more layered and fleshes out the character details. Still, Mitchum is a tough nut in this one." I really need to revisit the remake. I haven't seen it since the 90s, but I really should see it again. But anyway, if you haven't seen Cape Fear, make sure you check it out. And the final one I want to talk about, the best first time watch I had last year, and that's Mary and Max from 2009. This is an Australian stop motion animation film that follows the unlikely friendship between the two title characters. The thing is that on the surface, Mary and Max couldn't be more different. Mary is a young girl growing up in Australia, while Max is a middle aged man with Asperger's syndrome living in New York City. The fact that both are plagued by overwhelming loneliness makes those differences and the thousands of miles between them blur as they begin this friendship through letters that last decades. I knew very little about this film when they recommended it to me, but I really didn't have a lot of expectations for it. Turns out I was wrong in how great the film is, but also how devastating it is. Mary and Max is a crushing snapshot of what it feels to be lonely, whether you're a young, bullied girl or a misunderstood middle aged man. But at the same time, it is a testament to how people can always find ways to understand and trust others, regardless of their many differences, to soothe that loneliness. Like I said, their friendship spans decades, or 20 years, as it goes through numerous twists and turns, ups and downs, and it's all structured through their frequent letters where they write about things as mundane as their shared love of a TV show, the Noblets, or typical coming of age questions from Mary to more philosophical questions about life, religion, food, and chocolate. The letters might seem like ramblings, but they still hide this natural desire from both of them to be understood, to be listened to. And like I said, the film covers a significant amount of time where you can see this is not a case of a steadfast bond that never breaks or a sugar coated friendship. There's a lot of heartache, death, and tragedy between them. There are misunderstandings between Mary and Max that cause rifts that sometimes take years to heal. But through it all, there is always that openness from both to forgive and be forgiven, to be honest, to understand and keep walking, knowing that there's someone out there that understands you. It's a beautiful, beautiful film and one that really moved me like I had no idea. So if you're up for something like that, definitely check Mary and Max. Back when I saw it, my friend Bern from Cinema Recall commented, "Great movie, I should rewatch it." Yes, you should, Bern, and so does anybody that has seen it or hasn't seen it. Those are just five of the best first time watches I had last year, 2025. But a couple of other honorable mentions that I want to bring up. I saw a total of 242 films last year, so there was a lot of stuff. But anyway, in no specific order, Night Moves from 1975 is a pretty great neo noir from Arthur Penn and starring Gene Hackman. I think I saw that one shortly after Hackman died. Point Blank from 1967 is yet another great, gritty neo noir with Lee Marvin as the lead. City Lights from 1931 was probably the last of the big Chaplin features I hadn't seen, and it was lovely. Riding the Whirlwind from 1966 was a pretty good western starring a very young Jack Nicholson. Rocky Horror Picture Show from 1975 was a big blind spot for me, but it was a blast, a lot of fun. Dos Monjes from 1934, that was a visually striking film from Mexican Juan Bustillo Oro. Sick from 2022, I think it's from Kevin Williamson, was a fun slasher that was better than I was expecting. La Strada from 1954, that was my third Fellini, and it was a joy, tragic but joyful. And there were other really great ones that I saw. Perfect Blue from Satoshi Kon, The Setup, McCabe and Mrs. Miller from Robert Altman was great too. Black Bag from Steven Soderbergh, and many others. So that was my comeback loot. I hope you enjoyed listening, and if you check out any of these films I talk about, let me know. You can still find the podcast on Twitter at TMML2021 or Blue Sky at The Movie Loot. You can find me personally on both Twitter and Blue Sky at TIFCGT. Like I always say, reach out to us. Let's talk film. Let's talk about movies. As you know, the podcast is still available on every podcasting platform from Apple Podcasts and Spotify, Good Pods, iHeartRadio, and everything in between. So that'll be until the next episode. When will it be? I don't know, but stay vigilant, cuz
I'll be back.